All right, everyone, welcome to this conversation that we're about to have. My name is Catherine Urban. I'm an astrologer, and I would like to introduce my guest, Mo Olufemi. And we are going to be talking about the astrology of the presidential forecast of 2024. The terrain is rapidly changing. So when I first reached out to Mo about joining me in this conversation today, I initially thought that we were going to be just like talking about the full forecast, like up until the election, up until the inauguration. But the terrain is changing, and we're going to be talking about that here today. And I reached out to Mo because Mo did some amazing threads on Twitter about her amazing and thorough research into her forecast of what she was foreseeing that was going to happen. And I realized that there was a ton of parallels. So I just knew we had to get together. Mo, welcome. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your practice.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Catherine. I know it's been a while since we've sort of collaborated, but um, I think everything that's happening has just been too crazy to not sort of compare notes with other astrologers on. So I'm Mo. I have a mostly Hellenistic as well as medieval Islamic astrology practice. So a lot of my techniques and understanding comes from those two traditions. I am dabbling in Jyotish as well. So from time to time, I do look at things like the dashas or specific transits through the lens of Vedic astrology. So that's been interesting. I do have a podcast that's kind of been on hiatus. It is coming back at some point this
Yay.
year. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, I think I just wanted to throw my hat in the ring because I think last election I kind of had predictions, but I feel like I waited too long to publish them. And so I'm like, you know what? Back in January, I was like, we may as well use some of these new techniques that I'm playing around with and using with clients with pretty good accuracy. So let's see what happens when you apply some of these to charts of people who, are driving the boat, more or less.
I feel the exact same way. And I do just want to brag about you for a minute because like you are a younger astrologer, and I'm just continuously floored by the level of astrology that you practice, the integrity that you practice with. And like you're a total rising star, and you are a star. And I'm just like so happy to collaborate with you. You've been a guest teacher in Cauldron, which is my monthly astrology group. And you just like took us to school, basically teaching us about decans, and we loved it. So I'm so thrilled to work with you and to be alongside you as your colleague at this time.
Thank you for sort of giving me a vehicle to do this. It's very much appreciated because a lot of your stuff on progressions is very interesting. That's one technique that I ironically got me into predictive astrology, but I could never get my head around them. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's been great.
I know there's so many techniques out there, and I just wanted to bring in too, because you mentioned that you're learning some new techniques and experimenting with them, and I just want to piggyback on what you said, and say that I'm coming from the exact same place. I think we're learning a lot of the techniques that we're going to be talking about today from the same sources, which we will cite,
Mhm.
give credit. But yeah, same thing. I feel like the Aries North Node is favoring the bold, like whether it ends up being like I've been approaching this experiment like with the attitude of like I'm an astrologer. That's what astrologers do, is make predictions. That's part of our
Mhm.
lineage. And why not? And if I get it wrong, then I'm going to learn from it. Or in this case, like there's so many layers to this prediction that I'm kind of more like, it's not a definitive right or wrong. It's more of a let me see what these techniques are able to show me.
Mm-hmm.
And if my prediction is off, then I'm so curious to learn where it was off and how I can improve. So, but I've been having good luck with these new tools as well. So yeah.
They are crazy good. And it's funny how sometimes like there's just so much in the techniques. I'll go back and look at predictions that I made and it's like, yes, it's great that I pointed this out, but there was this whole other oddly specific thing, like especially with the lots, where it's like, why did I not look at these lots? Like I missed something huge. So it's been quite the ride, I must say.
Yeah, and that's why it takes time to hone your craft, because we're always learning from hindsight, and we're learning from our own mistakes, we're learning from other astrologers' mistakes too. And that's why I'm coming to this predictive work with utmost humility, because I have seen, like specifically in 2016, where a panelist of astrologers famously all predicted that Hillary Clinton would win, and of course she didn't. And so I think astrologers as a community walked away from that saying, like, what can we learn from that? How can we do better next time? And I'm always on the hunt for like the best techniques. And so that's why I've been so excited about these techniques that Dr. Ali Alomi has been sharing. I know I've been enjoying learning from him, and you too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really want to reiterate what you had said about the 2016 election. I mean, even in some of the other spaces that I'm in where people are analyzing political things happening in other parts of the world, I do see how astrologers do let their own bias highlight that, oh, like this person is having this bad transit, but it's like, step back for a second. When you actually look at this person's chart, and you look at their timing as well, um, the timing that you think is bad is actually not bad. So I know you don't like this political figure, right? But when you step back and you're not as like invested in a particular outcome, you can really see like, that doesn't look good, or that doesn't look that looks great, you know? So
Yeah.
um I can see some astrologers already kind of falling into the trap, and I also would caution people to say, oh, it's obvious that a particular person is going to win just because like they don't want to be wrong and like they like overcorrect in the other direction. I'm going to go with an outcome that I don't agree with because it makes me appear less biased instead of rooting it in technique and astrological principles. So I'm hoping that in our back and forth, people can kind of see like different techniques and how it's important to really get into sort of the descriptive nuance before like wholesale making a particular prediction.
Totally. Totally. I mean, we're human, we have our biases, but as astrologers, we need to be prepared to check those biases and let the chart speak for itself. So yeah, I'm always like, especially when I'm seeing something where it looks a little gray, I'm always like, okay, just read the chart. What does the chart say? And that was one of my first traditional astrology teachers, Mira Epstein. She always said that, just look at the chart. What does the chart say? Like, don't try to force what you want to see onto it. There are styles and branches of astrology where you can apply that creative, what could I get from this chart? But and that's a muscle you want to have as an astrologer. But when it comes to concrete predictive work, you need to be able to just, what is the chart saying, and how would I apply this interpretation to someone else? Because as we are going to see with Trump, there's a lot of 12th house energy with him, but there's 12th house energy with Biden too going on right now. So
Mhm.
how can I definitively just say, oh, Trump's going to jail, and not be open to that happening to Biden too? You have to be able to see both.
Totally. Yeah, so I don't know. And on top of that, like looking at the charts of individual actors in this case, like I think the techniques that we have or are working with are really great for that. But there are even other techniques beyond this scope that could describe overall themes. So like I do want to say that like this isn't the only way to sort of get where things could possibly go.
Totally. Totally. There's lots of different tools out there. So we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna be looking at some charts today. We're gonna be breaking it all down. In light of the recent presidential debate, this is what I wanted to say earlier, is that Mo and I have decided that we're not gonna look all the way till the end. We are just gonna look at the next couple of months because the recent developments following the first presidential debate have colored in some of the question marks for us. It has validated some of the things that we were forecasting, but of course, this now means that the terrain is shifting a little bit. So we need to kind of wait and see how things develop over the next couple of months, and then we're going to do another check-in. But what we're going to do today is we're going to look at some of the backdrops of celestial influences happening around the time of this election. What time is it in a greater scope? And then we're also going to be looking at the solar returns of each candidate. And we're also going to be looking at Kamala Harris's chart today, because that was one thing that Mo and I shared in our forecasting, is that we see her role being especially important in the coming year. So yeah. So let's go ahead. Why don't we start by recapping? Why don't we recap a little bit about, because everyone wants to know, like, what happened? That was a terrible debate. What happened? What were the transits going on? Let me see if I can pull up the chart for that. Do you have the chart for that one, Mo?
I don't remember exactly when the debate started. I wanted to say it was what, 9 Eastern. I don't know where they were when they had the debate either. Let me check actually. What, where were they? Oh, they were in Atlanta. So it would have started at, I think it was 9 Eastern in Atlanta
Let's see here. And that was
on the
June.
27th of June.
Okay. The one chart I don't have pulled up. I've got like 50 charts in the queue right now. All right. Let me go ahead and share.
Yes, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. So yeah, at the time of this debate, oh my goodness. Wait a second. It's not the chart I want. Okay, here we go. So at the time of this debate, Saturn was stationing retrograde at 19 degrees Pisces. And this is the same degree actually as Biden's IC.
Hmm.
So that was definitely the thing that stood out the most to me in terms of what was slowing him down.
Right.
Yeah. I know Chris Brennan also pointed out that Saturn was stationing, and we have a presidential debate with the two oldest candidates, really, that we've had. So that was also big Saturn symbolism there.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty evocative that one, Mercury was in a mute sign, and Mercury in water signs is not the most direct when it comes to communicating its point. So that much was very evident with that particular debate. And I think Mercury receiving those rays from Saturn, who was also stationing, also again, like not a very constructive manifestation, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. It looks like the moon is also void as well. So,
Yeah, in a traditional sense. Yeah.
yeah, so not really a constructive period for exchanging ideas, if you
Mm-mm.
will.
No. And one way that I looked at it too is you can also set up this event chart like a who will win. And so I was kind of looking at it like the ruler of the first house which is Saturn would be the incumbent, and Saturn is stationary. So
Mm-hmm.
that's slowing him down, which he literally was like freezing. I felt so like I felt bad for him because I was like, he needs to be like in bed somewhere. I was nervous he was going to fall over, actually,
Same.
if I'm being completely honest. And Trump would have been represented by the seventh house, which we've got Venus there, which is bonifying the seventh house. And then he would be represented by the moon. So the moon being in its joy in the third house, even though most of the things that came out of his mouth were exaggerations and attacks, he still came off to people as the winner of the debate. So he was actually had a better chance. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot of that there, and it's just unfortunate that that's kind of how that ended up playing out. I think it's also interesting as well that I don't know, just looking at that Mercury in the seventh, and I think that Mercury's transiting Trump's Venus Saturn conjunction. Saturn is also his most active planet, so I think that there was some stimulation there around like deceptive means of communication to, justify his pursuit of office. So there's just a lot of activation transit-wise for Trump with respect to the debate. I mean, he's also having a Venus return right now as well. So he's having a simultaneous Venus Mercury return. So there's something more natural about the way that the transits are playing out, that is typical for his preferred mode of communication, as well as just sort of bridge building with people. I feel like also there was also these weird attempts to pander to groups that Trump doesn't usually care to pander to, particularly giving a shout out to Black people or Latinos. Not something that Republicans typically deploy as a strategy, to be honest. It was interesting to see that kind of mirrored in the debate, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was not a bad night for him. That's for sure. Um, yeah. So one of the things that I do want to get into now is how the terrain is shifting a little bit, because immediately following the debate, newscasters started reporting on CNN that the Democratic Party is freaking out and they're considering replacing him. And there was all these opinion pieces in the New York Times in the days following around how this is like Biden should depart and it could be graceful and he could be putting the American people first, putting the country first. But then he had like a meeting with his family. He spent the weekend with his family, and everyone's saying, no, he's staying on. He's trying to reassure donors. But I know we talked about this, Mo, but I'm not so sure that he will remain the Democratic nominee. I think there are some indications that he could end up pulling out of the race. I know he's probably not quick um to rebuke his nomination, but I
Hmm.
do think it's a strong possibility that he will end up forfeiting simply maybe because of health matters.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm gonna have to agree there.
Let's
And I
hear it.
thought
Let's
it
hear
was,
it.
I thought it was a little, I thought it was a little crazy hearing the Dems freak out about, oh, we possibly need to run a new candidate. We need to like think about other people who could sort of represent the party. Just thinking of, let's see, Joe's, this is probably me also like trying to get into perfections because he's what, in the Mercury here as well,
Let's
right?
do it. Let's do it. We're just going to dive right into Joe Biden's chart, since he's kind of the big topic at the moment, the big question mark at the moment. And then we're going to look at Trump. So we're going to look at everyone who's in the running for the next few months. That's what we're going to do today. So why don't I pull up Biden's natal chart?
Yeah.
I think it's right here. And just to clarify for audiences who are watching, I am using a slightly rectified chart for Joe Biden just by a couple of minutes. And this was rectified by Chris Brennan. And Chris made a case for the lot of spirit being in the sign of Cancer versus Gemini with his 8:30 birth time that astrologers had. And I've been playing around with it, and I do prefer it. So I'm using an 8:33 a.m. time. So just wanted to make that clear. But here's his natal chart. So Mo, you were talking about his perfection.
Yes. So he's in that Virgo perfection. So that's activating the planet Mercury. There's no planets in Virgo. Mercury rules the 10th house along with the 7th. So definitely makes sense for a year where he's competing for public office again. But that Mercury is in the 12th house. It's combust. It's maltreated by Mars, the out of sect malefic. And it's interesting because sometimes whenever I see in client charts, there's like an activation of the 10th house ruler who is natally in the 12th or the 12th ruler in the 10th, especially if it is a more difficult or challenged planet. There can be sorts of like professional transitions that are uncomfortable. So for me, this is like walking away from office or something to that effect. I know that in my last prediction for Trump, he had some weird activation of his 10th house lord in the 12th. And I was like, something tells me he's not going to be in office. Like, and that was pretty literal to me. So I think that that is very much in the realm of possibility, especially for the fact that Mercury is not visible. It's also being burnt out by two planets that are of the hot and dry nature. So, yeah.
And that can create exhaustion, like burnout. Yeah. 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 Interestingly, because he was elected during his Gemini ruled year 4 years ago. And so I looked at that Mercury and I recognize how damaged it is. It does have some help from Mars just being co-present with its ruler, but the rest of it is looking pretty rough. I mean, you've got a trine with Jupiter, which is nice. So there's some redeeming qualities for this Mercury. And I was trying to rationalize, like, okay, so he won with this Mercury last time. You do see a lot of presidents with 12th house placements. You do. And it's because of the private nature that is required of the job and all the like secrets and everything that you have to keep. Like you have to be stealthy if you're going to be the leader of a country. And so having 12th house planets often shows up there. So I thought that that was interesting, but you're absolutely right, Mo, about how the condition of this planet is really challenged for this year.
Yeah, no, it's also fascinating to think about the fact that he won during another Gemini ruled perfection. I think Saturn also co-owned that perfection just because it's in Gemini, and Saturn was in good condition at the time he got elected. So, um, for some reason, whenever there's anything that has to do with campaigning or building coalitions and things of that nature, I feel like it's very third house. And so it made sense that, he was able to win on that basis, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're talking about his annual themes right now from his solar return, which began on November 19th of 2023. So he's going to actually get a whole new set of themes coming up here very soon on his birthday, just after the next election. So something that I love to do is I love to compare the natal the time lord. So I like to compare the natal condition with that of the solar return to give more texture, to give more of a picture of what are we working with in this present year. And I've done webinars on this. You can also check the work of Dr. Ali Alomi. His Patreon is amazing. It's a total encyclopedia. You can also check out the translation of Abu Mashar's on the revolutions of nativities. by Dr. Benjamin Dykes, and he talks about how to do this too. So those are my main sources here. But you want to look at like the quality of the planet, and that can tell you like how good of a year they're going to have. You can also read into its to it on a descriptive level to get more details about the year. And so as far as his chances, because I was initially looking at this, like, what are his chances of reelection? Because the election happens before his birthday. And I see Mercury in Sag, like, okay, it's in detriment. But it is in the 5th house, which is life-giving. I do like a 5th house Mercury. And yeah, I thought that like moving from the 12th house, moving from the obscurity of the 12th house, which can also indicate infirmity or secrets, things that a person is hiding. Moving to the 5th house, I thought was a good pretender. Also, the little sextile with Venus in Libra over here, I thought was nice.
Yeah, no, you know what's fascinating to me? Just because Mercury, so even though Mercury is in the 5th, it's ruling the 11th and 2nd in the return. Mercury is always by default going to say things about Biden's 10th and his 7th, because that's what it rules natally. And I find one of the underrated significations of the 5th house is an emissary or someone who acts on your behalf. And
Ooh,
so it's making me think, um, I'm not doing so hot. Someone else act as an agent on my behalf to accomplish something, which makes me think, okay, of that 12th, 5th connection where it's like I have to go away or something is concealed, so someone else has to sort of like act on his behalf. And I think the detriment quality speaks to sort of that, like maybe the rushedness or the less than ideal circumstances under which that happens.
totally.
So,
Oh my goodness, totally. And I also thought it would be important about his children too. And I
mhm,
know his son is facing some pretty big deal indictments and
mhm,
charges and everything like that. So his children end up being an important piece of this year.
mm,
And yeah, another thing that really stood out to me, especially since the debate, and I did, for those of you who don't know, I did publish a 46-page research paper on my total forecast of the presidential outcome. And I published that a couple months ago, I believe. And so it's all up there. It's all up there. But I'm already able to look at things in hindsight. And I'm wondering if the importance of his sign of the year landing on the 2nd house, I wonder if that's important in terms of like how much energy he has in order to fill the demands of this role. One thing,
definitely.
yeah, and another thing here that I saw that I liked. So in terms of what are his chances of being reelected? Because the solar return is going to tell us about the whole year, the whole year. I like the moon on the descendant because the moon represents the public. And I would think that that would be important, just seeing the moon on an angle. Now, it is on the descendant, though. So there's maybe another connection with the importance of the 7th house and partnership. But overall, I'd like to see the moon angular in terms of feeling like they're connecting with the public body. Now, here's a big elephant in the solar return, and that is the lot of fortune. The lot of fortune is in Taurus, and this corresponds with Biden's 6th house of health issues. So, in a traditional context, the 6th house does deal with ailments and the things that we do in a more modern context to fend those off, to maintain our health. But when you see something like the lot of fortune, something that is outside of your control, being connected with the 6th house of ailments, that to me really raised an eyebrow, Mo, because I know astrologers have been looking at his 6th house moon with a great deal of scrutiny too. Like we've seen Saturn go by it. We've seen Uranus well, not Uranus recently, but we've seen Saturn go by it and we were all nervous. And then Pluto is now squaring this moon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's now two indications that health matters may be a little insecure at this time.
Okay, so this is where I bring in the 12th parts. So the 12th part of the ascendant is actually in Taurus, which is his sixth house. And that to me, again, feels like health matters, creating some kind of situation around the legality of what needs to happen if, say, something were to happen to him. Like now, like looking back at the decans or like looking at the 12 parts and seeing where things overlay, it's like becoming very obvious that yes, like we're probably entering some kind of weird situation where, okay, people are thinking about how can we, I don't know, contort the Constitution to possibly replace him if need be.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of ninth house themes in his solar return next year, which makes me raise an eyebrow about exactly what you're saying. And yeah, thank you for bringing that in. So just to reiterate for those of you who haven't learned this technique, the 12 parts are a hidden zodiac. And so looking at the 12th part of the ascendant and the solar return can give you more layers of importance in the year ahead. So that's the one you were looking at, right, Mo?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So right there in the solar return, multiple indications that health matters could be a big deal this year. And then also something that I've kind of just been noticing personally is that when a planet is on an angle, you better look at what that planet is doing in the natal chart. And again, that angular moon bringing importance to the natal moon, which is under duress from Pluto at this time. And, an exalted moon is very strong, but not when Pluto is challenging it, because Pluto is going to transform something permanently. So and a firework just went off in my neighborhood. Yeah, like whatever Pluto touches, it's never going to be the same again. And I think we caught a glimpse of that on Thursday night. Something that astrologers have been like looking at very closely with bated breath for the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing it. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, just thinking about sort of the theme of that decan where the moon is and his return. So I find that, I don't know, the last decans of like the fixed signs, there's sort of like challenge or liminality that you're dealing with. And I really like thinking about that opposition between the last decan of Leo, which is like, okay, I'm taking on all of this energy and like putting my life on the line for this important cause, right? I find that some of the themes of Aquarius 3 are kind of opposite to that, where it's like, okay, it's time to cut losses and move on sometimes and see like, okay, when you strip away all of this other stuff, what is the core of like what I want, what I'm moving towards ideologically, and is that more important? And sometimes that does look like not putting yourself front and center and taking up for the cause. So it'll be really fascinating to see how the moon plays out in that particular context.
So Aquarian, right? And
Hmm.
isn't that pretty close to the degree of the United States moon too?
It is.
Damn. Damn.
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
what do you make of that Sun Mars conjunction? Because I saw that and I was like stressed out.
I was just had my button on there. Yeah, yeah, there's a couple things going on with the sun for sure. And we would be curious about the sun for someone whose health might be of important concern, because the sun is a huge source of vitality and health in the chart. And yeah, he didn't quite make that Kazemi, did he? That might have been
No.
helpful in the solar return.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is like a very strong Mars, but the sun doesn't hold any sort of stake right there. And so that sun is very much afflicted by this Mars. Um, and you know what? The Mars rules his 12th house. So this may be more afflictions of the mind than anything else. And we did see him lose his train of thought. And to be fair, I was watching that and I was like, it's past my bedtime too. I stopped making sense after a certain time. I can only imagine what it's like at that age, but legitimate concern for a leader of a country. But yeah, that makes me wonder if that's maybe an affliction of the mind, an ailment of the spirit. Not to mention transit wise, we're also seeing transiting Uranus oppose his sun. So that, I mean, if that could be tons of fun as a transit, but that could also be like my energy is kind of one day I have a ton of it and the other day I have none of it. And that for a person of his age, yeah, that kind of transit would make me a little nervous for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, when the conjunction to Mars happens, it's opposing his sun, and that looks very volatile, looks very accident happy. So I I don't think he's out of the woods in terms of health or vitality stuff. I do think it's fascinating that Mars is technically retaking its oaths because it's in the same sign.
True.
It's doubling down on what Mars wants to do, which is interesting that, Mars says things about his children, the people who act on his behalf, things like that, and they live in the 12th, maybe doing some hidden things, maybe some shady things. I feel like there's a lot of overlap with respect to how he's handled everything happening in the Middle East, for example, and how his emissaries are behaving overseas, things of that nature becoming very obvious, maybe in a way that's more damaging to him, his person, and his essence, if you will, more so than typical. And then when you have close conjunctions of a return planet to a natal planet, that planet is said to return on behalf. And so you have to look at where the returning planet signs fall relative to the signs of the natal planet. So, for example, the sun rules Leo. So, where are Mars and Scorpio relative to Leo? So, Mars owns the fourth house, it owns the ninth. And so, again, I think there's a lot more of this seeing the discrepancy between how we act abroad and what that means for what we do at home, very much showing up for him this year. But then Mars is also returning on behalf of Venus, right? So relative to both Venusian signs, Mars owns the seventh house. I think relative to Taurus, Mars owns the 12th. Again, bringing up that sort of shady backroom type stuff that's happening. And then it also rules the second relative to Libra. So I do think that maybe on some level, I don't want to say Joe's handlers, but like the people around him who may speak for him when he's not available. Um, Maybe creating more difficult situations for him, both in terms of justifying his policies as well as like explaining truths about his well-being, I think becoming really obvious.
Totally. No, I agree. I think that there's something happening and they've known about this and they're like, let's just make it to reelection. Um, but yeah, I'm so glad you brought up. I'm just gonna take a little digression here from Joe. We'll come right back, promise. Um, Wait a second, this is not the right chart. My goodness. I guess I'll come back to it in a moment, but I do want to bring back I do want to come back to the Aries Ingress because the Aries Ingress says some things. The Aries Ingress says some things about how the public may feel about Biden this year. So I'm actually gonna. This is the
I think
PDF of
it's like
mine.
I think it's like a minute off for some reason on Solar Fire. Because the chart
Hmm.
looks right, it's just the sun hasn't quite like moved yet or something.
So
Like
weird. Well, I am going to just pull it up on my PDF right here.
Okay.
So let me screen share it. All right, so this is the PDF version of the article I was mentioning. And I'm just going to zoom in here on the Aries Ingress for the United States, the one that we're currently in. So this is a chart astrologers use to forecast mundane events. You can cast it for the capital of various nations, and it's going to tell you about things particular to that nation. And there's a whole way to interpret them. But I wanted to bring this up because when we look at who's the president, it's the 10th house. And we see the ruler of the 10th house in the 6th house of ailments. And initially, when I looked at that, I was thinking, gosh, this is about the military. This is about the wars that the president is supporting. This is about the controversies around that. And so I was thinking like military. And I saw the moon representing the public in this opposition with Pluto. So this intense dissatisfaction with leadership, 10th house.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't realize is that maybe this is talking about not just Biden's involvement with everything going on in the Middle East right now, but also with just like, these are our options for president, like this awful discontent. And it's so bad that the news is even acknowledging it. Because in elections past, they've tried to like tone it down and just keep the talking heads going with the script, but they can't avoid it anymore. Like everyone is talking about how dissatisfied people are in America with their options.
Yeah, no, so it's interesting that you framed it that way because I was thinking of like the relationship between the moon, the 10th house, the fourth house, and like their respective rulers. And I do find it fascinating that yes, the moon has reception with the sun and it's in Leo. So it's like the people I would say are in some sense like with the incumbent, in my
I agree.
opinion,
I agree too.
separating from, so like maybe not like happy with, but like still interested in the incumbent, aligned with the incumbent and
Yes.
whatever they're doing. Um, yes, moving away from the incumbent, but not moving towards the opposition because the opposition is an aversion. There's no aspect, right? So that was really fascinating to me. And it's almost like the will of the people and the will of the opposition are on two different planets. Like they are not fixated on the same things.
Completely agree. Yeah, no, I saw the same thing. I said, okay, well, the moon is the public, it's placed in the 10th house, retaining that trine with the sun. And yeah, so the support is still there, even though there's also this discontent with
Hmm.
the terrain.
Yeah.
So many people are in a bad place right now
Hmm.
with the economy and everything. And I was also looking, and this just came through today. I don't know if I can even get into this, but Jupiter on the descendant, symbolizing like the courts and the lot of fortune in the 9th house. And what the hell is going on with the Supreme Court right now? But it made me think of this Aries Ingress chart right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that between Jupiter being in Taurus and Saturn and Pisces even just speaking to corruption of like legal figures and false prophets and the like, I think that it's interesting that that plays in very strongly in this particular chart. Um, Co-opting rules from Vedic, Venusian signs and Jupiter are not they're not friendly. They're two
Really?
different types of good, right? So Jupiter's a little more abstract, with its good, less materialistic, less subjective. Venus is more subjective, more individualistic, right? And so when you have Jupiter, who's supposed to be about, you know, the invisible hand, providence, greater good, being like, show me the money and becoming materialistic, it's already corrupting everything Jupiter's supposed to be doing. So, like, seeing that and thinking about the way that that kind of lays the groundwork for the unraveling that happens when Jupiter goes into Gemini, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Oh my goodness.
So,
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
I love learning new things from you. Um, okay, so one more thing in this Aries ingress chart, just since we should outline it a little better, is so if the 10th house is the president, then the
Mm,
fourth house is the opposing party. And so
mhm.
if we want to understand Donald Trump and his chances of winning and public favorability, then we want to look at the fourth house, we want to look at Saturn. So Mo, what do we think about this Saturn here?
I mean, Saturn's enclosed by the benefics, so there's a lot of support or co-signment for what Trump is wanting to do, but it's not coming from the people. It's not coming from the people.
Mhm.
So,
I was looking at this Venus here and I'm like, that's the trad wife. That is the trad wife emergence right there.
yeah, but I'm also like wondering because I know that Dr. Lomi in his demo of the year said there would be sort of an elevation of women. And I'm wondering if Venus's encounter with the opposition is sort of the opposition trying to put a kibosh on that where possible.
Mm,
So, but I could also
interesting.
see that being like the emergence of all this weird trad wife business in
Yeah.
response to whatever's happening.
Well, he was very correct because Dr. Lomi was looking at this chart too to like tell us about the whole world. And we did see the first female president elected in Mexico, which was really cool. She's a climate scientist.
Mm,
I think that's cool. I don't know much more other than she's a climate scientist. How cool. We should have more of those in power.
hmm.
But yeah, so that prediction of his did come true.
Yeah. I mean, again, I wouldn't be surprised if that also equally maps onto some of my other out there theories about where this could go. And again, trying to trigger some kind of constitutional crisis about this person can't win because the election was stolen. I don't know. That just seems like where we're kind of heading. So,
Yes, and we're getting there, folks. We're building up. We're building up. We're building up. So back to Biden's chart. So I think here's another thing I found in his progressions that supports his continued decline. Because that Pluto to the moon is very strong. And I want to be clear, I'm talking about the decline of his health. I'm not saying the decline of his potential to still win, because I still think that he could very much still win. But I'm looking at his progressed ascendant, and here the chart is cast for the day that we're recording this. But you can see that ascendant, that progressed ascendant at 29 degrees Aquarius, 15 minutes, it's about to change. It's about to change into Pisces. So the progressed ascendant tells us about our demeanor, our interface, how people perceive us. So who knows? Maybe his rectified chart should even be a little later. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if it's already in Pisces. So maybe I want to rectify that a little bit more because that was a different Biden than people have seen that we saw at the debate. But as of this birth time that I've been working with, that means that his progressed ascendant changes into Pisces in August. And that is going to present a lot differently. Like Pisces becomes a little bit more softer, I would say, than Aquarius, which is very cerebral, intellectual, very decisive, very clear. And Pisces, I mean, we're going to see that shift for for him at this age, he's going to become more softened. Pisces, we might see someone come more out of their head and into their heart. We might see someone become more attracted to like the feeling of something versus how the numbers are adding up. So when we see this in a person's chart, it's a very big deal. It's a very big change. And it means that their demeanor is going to change. And I'm just drawing a distinction between intellectual Aquarius and like a more softened Pisces approach. So
Yeah, it's also fascinating because his progressed lunar return is coming up,
yes.
and he's got a sixth house moon. Like, that's also not giving. So, what I will say is that the progressed ascendant having the dignity change and answering to a happier Lord with like progressed Venus also being in the first whole sign out, like, I feel like that's great for Joe Biden in terms of how people perceive him. I think that's great for him, especially with how things are going right now. However, I do think that coupled with the fact that he is coming up on a progressed lunar return and he has a sixth house moon, that is also very, I think, indicative of some kind of shift with health for sure.
Good point. Yeah. And I mean, like a shift into Pisces could mean a different thing for a different person at a different place in their life. But I'm just saying it's not going to help how people are perceiving him as being feeble. But what you're bringing in, Mo, I love it because people are like, you've done a good job, buddy. Like you've done a good job. Now we're going to clap you out kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the progressed lunar return, the way I interpret the progressed lunar return, one of the ways is just like you're coming back home to yourself in a way where you kind of have to check in with yourself about who you are at this stage of life. And so, yeah, there's going to be a need in the next couple of months here for him to do that. Mm-hmm. All right, Mo. So should we pull out the monthly returns?
Let's look
What
at
what
the
are you
monthly
feeling?
returns because I think that doing sort of like a month by month could be helpful.
All right, where should we start? Do you want to start with the current month? Do you want to start?
So he would technically be in what, like, because his birthday is at the end of the month. So be what, June?
Yeah, this is his. Can you see it? It's June
Yes, I can
18th.
see it. Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about how you do monthly charts because what I typically do is it's not that I don't read them as standalones, like look at the standalone, where's the ruler, blah blah blah. I focus a lot on, okay, where's the ascendant in the return, in the natal, where's the 12th part? Because that gives me like a whole delineation. And then I always look at what's the moon's condition, right? Can she see fortune? Is she busted? Is the month corrupt? Like things like that. So I tend to
Yes.
focus on that in the monthlies, but if there is like a thing where it's like, oh, the ruler of the chart is like in a particular house and it's very evocative, I will, mention it.
Yes. Yeah. This is where it's kind of the Wild West for Mo and I right now because we're learning this technique. We're having success with this technique. We both do it a little differently. So I'm excited to learn from you too, what you do. So this should be fun. But if anyone, we're not here to teach this whole technique. So if anyone wants to learn this, go check out Dr. Ali Olomi's Patreon. You can also check out On the Revolutions of in the Years of Nativities by Abu Mashar, translated by Benjamin Dykes. You can check those out. That's where I learned these techniques as well as trial and error.
Same,
Which I'm still in the trial and error phase, but having success. So
same.
yeah. So I the way I kind of get into it here, and I write everything out. I have like a whole system here because I feel like each month also helps you look at what the Time Lord is doing and what's going on with the perfected sign. So I think ancient astrologers use these monthly returns just for that too. So I have like a whole system of what I look at. But anyhow, looking at the ascendant for kind of like the energy of the month, we could look at the sign, what that says, but Uranus is there. So to me, that's a little louder. So some really unpredictable things happen. No one could have foreseen that. No one could have
No.
foreseen that debate was going to be such a bust for both candidates, So that was a little shocking. One of the most important things I also tend to look at here in the charts is what fortune is doing and who rules fortune.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that the planet that rules fortune is going to be the most important thing, because fortune's always going to kind of sort of be in this part of the monthly returns. But Saturn rules it. And so that automatically says that there's going to be some difficulties to be dealt with this month. Then I would look at the 12th part of the ascendant too. And that's going to be his third house, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be his third house. So a speech. That was the biggest event of this month. The biggest. Then I want to look at the moon. And obviously the moon is fallen, but I see it separating from Mars. So I'm like, they knew about this. There was something like they knew about this. They absolutely knew about this. But then, the moon goes on to make like a more stabilizing trine with Saturn. So I feel like people aren't going to forget about this bad night that they're calling it, but things will kind of stabilize momentarily again. What do you think?
Yeah,
What do you
no,
think?
definitely. Yeah, I mean, looking at the fact that the ascendant is obviously highlighting the natal sixth, concerns about his health, which corresponds with the return 10th. Again, is he fit to lead? And I think to your point about the third house being implied through the 12th part location, concerns about his speech, his mental faculties, his ability to communicate, even just hearing people make reference to maybe they shouldn't have had him like do like a whole tour of Atlanta in the whole week before this. Yeah, so because that was also an issue. I feel like a lot of your points I do agree with, and that was like kind of how I evaluated this. I would say the month is corrupt just because it is a fallen moon opposing his more challenging malefic, right? So yes, the sect of the chart might favor Mars, but Joe Biden is a diurnal nativity, so Mars will always be the malefic out of sect. But then I think the trine that the moon has to Saturn is very fascinating because I think that there may be some solution that comes about, but I think maybe the solution is one that is of it's like a restricting nature or like a conditional, this is the hard line, and if like this threshold or baseline is not met, there will be consequences type deal. Um, I do think sometimes whenever I see the moon is can see the lot of fortune and fortune is beholden by a malefic, I say that those are months where people are empowered to do difficult things.
Ooh, I love
Do
that.
do I think Joe Biden will get through this month? Probably. I think people may stick with him. I think that yes, the calls to remove him, I feel like that's gaining more traction, but will that be happening this month? Probably not.
Not this
So,
month. Not
not
this
this
month.
month. So, I wouldn't hold my breath about whatever decision he's making, like this weekend, because he's supposed to talk to the family or something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And gosh, this Pluto just stands out to me too. I always look at what's on the angles in these charts too.
mhm.
And that is just very revealing. Like, Pluto tells us about power, but it also does the reverse. So we saw the president of the United States, someone who's supposed to be someone who's largely very respected and feared. I'm saying supposed. But Pluto there, it did the reverse. It showed us someone who you could be compassionate toward because he is an old man at the end of his long career. And it doesn't matter how angry you are with a person like that, like seeing someone in that state kind of shows you their humanity, you know. And so Pluto there on the midheaven was just, it totally had that reversal effect of how he was supposed to be composed, you know.
Yes, Pluto reminding us all that even godlike figures bleed like we do. So I also find that it does have the quality of the way I think about it is in terms of like evolution, right? Like evolve or perish. So when people think Pluto like destroys things, it's like no, it's more of like an evolution, right? Because for those of us who still do consider the outer planets in our astrology, because I know some of us don't. Whenever I've looked at Pluto returns, I feel like the entity that is the United Kingdom right now is a great example. It didn't die, it took on a different form. And the parts that were relevant, just like that's why there's still a monarchy, right? It just took different forms under these different iterations. And I think that there is something implied here about like how the group that Joe Biden is affiliated with, just because that midheaven is in his third house, which I would say a political party is like a brotherhood, right? It's like people who function like family, right? You have to figure out how you want to function. So this is very much that test, I think, for them, for sure.
Mhm. Yes. All right, let's move on. Let's look at the next one.
Isn't that
This is
July?
Yeah, this is going to be July 19th through, let's see here, August 19th. So again, these are monthly return charts, and these help break down what's in the solar return chart. So the solar return gives you the annual theme. The monthly returns break down those themes and largely work under that umbrella, although they can also bring in additional details of things that maybe aren't necessarily defining for the whole year, but are going to define the month. So this is an important period because this is actually the period of the wait, does the
The
RNC?
RNC. I think it's the
Okay.
RNC.
I know Trump's his July monthly is like right. So this might actually be maybe past it a little bit.
I think it's like a couple days after.
Okay. But yeah, Biden's next one, August 19th, this is the day
That's the day
that
the convention starts.
the DNC, yeah. But let's take a look because I think that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look maybe through the month of we're going to get through the conventions is what we're going to do. So
Yeah.
let's look at this one, let's look at the next one, and then Mo and I will reconvene in a month or two and do another check-in.
Yeah.
So Mo, you want to take this one?
So this chart was fascinating to me because the 12th part, as you can see right here, is also an Aquarius yet again. So again, it's funny how there's like third house bringing that sort of community group aspect. We're building up towards like the convention, so I think that that's like kind of implied. The ascendant is in the natal 12th. It's in the return fourth. So the houses of endings and like legacies are also heavily implied here as well. So I'm wondering if like I'm not saying that again, I'm not necessarily saying that this means that Joe is going home and we're never going to see him again, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more private meetings with family, with people who are on that inner circle need to know basis about laying down the groundwork for securing his legacy behind closed doors. I would not be surprised if this is another one of those months where that does need to happen. Um, for this chart, let's see, where's the moon? The moon is in joy, but she's in her detriment. which again, it does feel like being able to sort of get that sympathy and support from people under those difficult circumstances. Fortune is again ruled by a malefic, this time the out of sect malefic. I think that this is yet another month where Joe et al. Are empowered to do difficult things, but I do think that compared to last month's chart, I would say there's like a little more urgency around possibly needing to make a decision about whether he's going to continue on or not. I think it's fascinating that we also have a repetition of we still have Mars and Taurus in this chart as well, even though it's like Mars just before it changes signs, right? Um, I wouldn't consider this month so much a corruption of the month, even though the moon is looking at the only thing it aspects really is like the malefics. They're not hard aspects, so there is somewhat of a corruption, but I think that there's more of a constructive relationship, and it feels like more of a facilitation of difficult decisions that need to happen around contingency plans. For the
Mm.
fact that the ascendant is in the first decan of Scorpio, however, I wouldn't be surprised if Joe is persisting, but making contingency plans, just considering the decan that Mars is in.
Yeah.
Contingency plan, decan of Taurus. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's that proceeding with some contingencies in place. And I find it interesting that Venus is in the 10th and Venus says things about partnerships. I would say that this is probably going to be a time where we're seeing more of Jill. We're going to be seeing more of Kamala. So just
Yes.
putting that out there.
Oh, completely agree. Completely agree. Yeah, so this is I think a major month for Biden, and what you mentioned about the 12th part being ruled by being associated with Aquarius and the third house. I was also thinking media too. Like, I think they have to be very strategic here. And when you and I were talking the other night, we both kind of, as we were talking about how things could potentially play out, and you said something about the Biden Harris ticket and the way that you described the Biden Harris ticket being successful. I agree with that, because I think that they are going to continue working together, and this is a month, what, in whatever capacity, whether she's kind of behind the scenes helping in a very big way, or whether he endorses her and helps, champion her as the nominee. I think partnership shows up in a very big way in this month. So yeah, he's actually in a sixth house perfection month this month. So health or
Oh,
military themes.
I thought that would have been June.
Was it? Wait,
Oh wait,
let's
no, no, no,
see.
you're right. Okay, sorry. I'm like confusing the actual like whole sign with the 12th part. I'm looking at my continuous perfection notes. Sorry. Like
No, you're good. No, the
I was like,
continuous, no, the continuous perfection. Let's see here.
you're right. It's the Taurus month. It is.
Hold on. The continuous perfection. Let me find it. Where is that one for this month?
So I know the 12th part is in Gemini, so it's activating his natal seventh.
Okay, you're right. Yeah, I have that here. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So partnerships are going to be really big. And what you were saying about the lot of fortune being ruled by the out of sect malefic, yes. So that I agree. I think there's going to be some difficulty. Um, Sometimes I look at the lot of spirit too,
Hmm.
and this is really striking to me. Like, if the lot of spirit is how we take action, this could be some sort of brave, courageous decision around, because as I was preparing his forecast for the year, I was almost wondering, like, would he be happy to lose? Like, would he be relieved um like if he lost. And I think he would. I think
You
he'd probably
know,
prefer to win, but
this is interesting because when we look at all of his like the three levels of the monthly transfers, when you're not looking at the charts, but you're looking at just the perfection.
Mhm,
So Venus and the moon are activated because Taurus is active, but then the 12th part comes to Gemini, which is his seventh, which
mhm.
holds his natal Saturn, and then the helper is Saturn. So I actually flagged that as a pseudo month of destiny. So I do think that he is making important choices about partners, and I would not be surprised if towards the end of this month, so because technically this covers even the days leading up to the convention, I wouldn't be
Yeah, true.
surprised if like there are conversations again with a woman-like figure, his wife, his running mate, about like how things are going to work. Like I really would not be surprised if this is the month where those contingencies are made on the back end and then come August, like maybe it's time to execute. I'm not sure if it's August or September, but those months
No.
look a little more stressful. So,
I completely agree. Yeah, and like Scorpio gives like a seriousness here with the
mm,
ascendant. So like having to face things, not shy away from them. The other thing that happens this month is that all of his big outer planet like transits are like within a degree. So Pluto is extremely close in that square with his natal moon. Saturn is still at 19 degrees on his IC, which could indicate there's a lot of fourth house emphasis in Biden's chart over the next year. So that could pretend to move. It
yeah,
absolutely could pretend to move. Now, again, the Bidens own a lot of properties. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's the White House, but there's a significance on the fourth house through next year's Venus retrograde. But also Uranus is making an exact, like almost exact opposition to his sun right now. So I think you're right, Mo. Like he's coming to some difficult decisions behind the scenes right now, some maybe difficult realizations. And not to mention the monthly ruler being Venus is
hmm
not in the best shape in his chart either. So,
no.
okay. All
Let's
right.
do August, and I think that's a great, like once we get to August, it'll be great to like flip to Trump
Yeah.
because now I'm like reflecting on my notes for Trump as well.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Okay.
I know you guys are sick of seeing Aquarius be active, but this is yet another one where Aquarius is the 12th part. So I think it's just speaking to the nature of like communicating with the media, doing group related things, deciding things as like a community body, right? So that feels very literal. Um, because the ascendant is in the fifth house of the natal and I think the ninth of the return. Again, there's something about rules around like representation and maybe people who get to act as agents for him. I think that there may also be stuff coming up around like young people. And just because it's a Mars ruled place, like I definitely think that reckoning with the protests that are going to be coming, just given everything that's happened, like I think that's also going to be a point of contention. I think it's fascinating that Mars is with Jupiter in the third of the return chart. And again, I think it's pointing to some of this like ideological contention that's happening. Also, this particular T square that's happening during this month, it's a stressful month for anyone who has mutable angles, to be honest with you. And so you got Mars and Jupiter coming together at the apex of this T square, kind of creating this outlet to solve the tug of war between Venus and Saturn, right? Who cannot agree on certain standards. Saturn's like, we are bound by these limitations to whatever ideology. Venus is like nitpicky about whatever, right? And you've got Saturn and Jupiter taking maybe audacious moves to correct some of these issues. And some of the motives or, the basis for doing so may be questionable considering Jupiter's condition. To add insult to injury, I think up until Mercury had gone back into Leo, Mercury was the final dispositor of everything. So this is when Mercury and the Sun had just come off their Cazimi. So it's almost like everybody's coming back to like a central force to coalesce behind a mandate. And so I do think that this month does have that flavor where everybody's coalescing around a candidate. Is it Joe? I don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't know. Considering that Mars is not doing terrible, but like not doing great. I mean, Mars is in term, right? So and Mars is able to do Gemini things in its own martial way. And I do think that this is a great time to, you know, tap in or out based on a technicality or some other like wordsmithing or what have you, right? And I think it's interesting that Jupiter rules the ninth. So there's some bending of the rules or law to make something happen. I don't know. I'm not sure if that means he's like going to be able to still be kind of kind of have one foot in, one foot out. Like I don't know why, but I do get that impression just because all of this is happening in the double-bodied signs. I do find it fascinating what the moon is doing because she can't see fortune. So like I do think that this is one of those months where being able to control the narrative and where things are going, it's not happening. However, fortune is ruled by a benefic. So like I think there's a sense of ease or like resolution, but I think that it's kind of out of his hands, right?
Yeah.
I don't like that the moon's on the 12th. The month is corrupt because the moon is just like angular to both malefics. So, um, I think this is going to be a more challenging month in that particular way. So, yeah.
Yeah. Good call. Yeah, no, I came to the same finding as you from a different way.
Okay.
Um, I definitely think that this is a month that out of all the months that I did for Biden, this one stood out probably the most to me. And I don't think I even realized that it was the DNC happening at the time because I'm not like I have an interest in politics, but I am by no means like on top of their calendar, you know?
Hmm.
But I saw Fortune in Libra and I thought, okay, something maybe more favorable is happening, but it's in Libra. This is also a seventh house month. So this is a seventh house month, being that his seventh house is associated with Gemini. This is the same Time Lord ruled house as his Time Lord. So there may be some importance there since he's in a Virgo ruled year. Now we're in a Gemini ruled month. I think that this could be a really important month. Aries on the ascendant giving a flavor to the month. That's going to be like taking charge, taking a chance, doing something courageous. And again, yeah, the third house, having to be strategic with the media. Um, you know, I just want to share something really quick because I did publish this in my article. I said, could it be possible that Biden endorses Harris for president in an unprecedented reversal partnership? Like I was kind of thinking like, would he be VP and she be president? Would the American public like that? Because what they're trying to do now is they're trying to spin it like, oh, Biden, he may be like really old, but he's got a good team. But I was just saying, like, the monthly return indications force me to consider the possibility because, like you said, that moon in the 12th house is not really in great shape.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something like I look at where the moon is by house in these charts. And so there's something there's some kind of infirmity or something hiding. Like I kind of thought maybe they'd be hiding a health issue, but we just saw it on full display. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even So another astrologer who also is learning with Dr. Alomi, Blaze or Max, pointed out that Jupiter Mars conjunctions are one of the minor conjunctions that are also considered from a mundane standpoint. And when they come together, they indicate the shifts of alliances politically. And so I think regardless of everybody who has some kind of activation around this period, because I think Trump also switches his into his August month around this time, maybe a couple days before when the conjunction's actually really tight. I think that there is the sign of the times is a change in sort of political alliances and structures. And so I'm wondering if there's even a shift in the party internally around maybe a choice he's making about whether he's going to represent or not, if you will.
Totally. Totally. And the one other thing I want to bring in to this chart, and then yeah, I do want to make our way over to Trump. Venus is moving through his sign of the year, and Venus is in an exact opposition with Saturn. So that is showing some difficult decisions. I look at Venus having like triplicity in Virgo, but also being fallen. That could very well be descriptive of feeling like the support, but like I'm stepping out kind of thing. And I don't really want to, but I have to because of my condition. So I'm going to do it in a way that feels as graceful as possible. Like I know everyone's like, he has an ego, he doesn't want to step down, but looking at this chart, I'm really forced to consider it. Unless, like, the other point of strategy I would say is he takes some amphetamines with this Aries rising and comes out and is just like, my vice president is the best, and just like reassuring people that if anything happens to him, that she's got this without saying it, you know?
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. Another thing that I do consider with the Venus Saturn opposition, just considering what they rule in his chart, like, so the 11th house is more of that, like, we're all in this like collective group. There's less intimacy, whereas the Saturn is more the interests of the intimates, just because that's third house social groups. And it feels like what Joe is balancing is the objectives and concerns and commitments that his inner circle has, Saturn, with the larger needs and criticisms of the party, Venus. And so, unfortunately, for the larger needs of the party, like basically, I've been telling clients Venus kind of gets the finger this month and it gets told you kind of have to suck it up because your concerns are like whatever. It's like bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing. I do think that whatever's decided, like a good chunk of Democrats or people who may be sympathetic towards the Democratic Party may not be happy with. But like to your point about Venus also having triplicity, Venus is also in her own decan as well. So
Oh.
I think that there's an element of quality control that Venus can probably respect, but the outcome is not working in her favor.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Um, Before we look at Trump, should we just look at her monthly return? What do you think?
Yeah, let's look at Kamala's briefly, just because it'd
Okay.
be good to compare.
Yeah. Let's just see. And then next time we connect, maybe we'll see what happens. I think we'll have to talk about her. So we'll
Yeah.
we'll do we'll do a deeper dive into Kamala Harris next time. But let's just take a look. Because do you know what's interesting is that her and Joe are synced up because her birthday is exactly 1 month before his. So their monthly return charts look the same. They look very similar, just arranged differently. But this is just one day after his August 19th one. So even though the media says that she was not his natural pick or whatever, how can, like, the synastry is there just based on fate lining up their monthly returns.
Hold on, I actually have to pull up her solar return really quick.
Yeah, I can pull it up. You want me to pull it up?
I don't know why I was looking at Gavin Newsom's, but his astrology looks really crazy. That's for another day.
Yeah, well, I got my eye on him too.
Me too. 2036 looks really good for him, and cough cough, Saturn conjunction in Libra on his sun. I like that's all I'm gonna say. ZR looks crazy. Other stuff like don't count him out. But Kamala for last year. Okay, let me pull that up just so that I can compare like where the okay, so and she's in the Aquarius perfection, right?
Yeah, she's in a 12th house year right now.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And
That's right. She's in
she's,
the Taurus perfection.
yeah, and she's going into a first house year just before the election. Yeah.
Got it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's funny because like her 10th house ruler is active because it's in that house. So like again, if something big happens to her career-wise, it would make a lot of sense, right?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot going on in Pisces.
Um, and then for her, just looking at her, let's see, her solar return. Da, da, da. Venus is retaking its oath. It's not returning on behalf of anything. Where's Mercury? I like that Mercury has triplicity. That's great. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a big improvement from what her Mercury's doing. Yeah, it's combust, but sometimes when I see combust planets, I'm like, it's just giving being in the room where it happens, for better or worse. So I think that definitely describes what's happening for her professionally. I do think it's interesting that Mars is returning on behalf of her Mercury. And what does Mars rule relative to Gemini? It's the 6th and the 11th, so it does feel like, I don't know, rallying the troops or like getting people excited around a cause. I see a lot of organizers who have like Gemini rising or even Sag rising just because of that 6th 11th sharing the same planetary ruler. More so for Gemini rising, just because it's Mars and Mars is doing so for like to fight for something, right? Um, and then relative to Virgo, it's the 8th and the 3rd. So that's interesting. So I mean it makes sense. She's on the campaign trail, like trying to raise
Mhm.
money, things like that.
Mhm.
Um, the moon in Capricorn, not really a fan. It doesn't feel good. Um, What else? So she's in the Venus year. Venus is doubling down on her typical thing. I'm not sure what to make of her Venus in terms of what that means for her professional trajectory, but it does
Oh, yeah.
seem to bode like that there's some kind of change with respect to living situation type stuff, things like that. That seems to be very highlighted, even with the ascendant being in the fourth as well.
Totally. Yeah, no, there's definitely some fourth house themes here that are really big. Also, this partnership thing going on with Neptune on the descendant, that seems to describe like there's some stuff going on with my partner, my business partner, I'm more
Hmm.
getting at. But yeah, her sign of the year. Well, I want to look at her ascendant. So her ascendant, her Gemini ascendant jumps to the 10th house.
Hmm.
So that ends up being something that she's really focused on is like her professional trajectory. But what ends up being really important is fourth house matters. So, like, would she end up like there's a lot of talk about the 25th Amendment, or would he step down early in order to avoid um like another round of primaries? You know what I mean? Like, were he to step out?
Yeah, no, it's interesting how she has a lot of weird like fourth, 12th stuff going on because when you look at the 12th parts of Fortune or the Ascendant, they're both in Taurus.
Mhm.
The 12th. I think the 12th part of the midheaven, I don't know where that is. I think that's in like, is that in Aquarius?
Yeah, yeah.
It's in Aquarius. Okay, so there is some stuff about maybe
A lot of ninth house stuff.
legality and
Yeah.
things of that nature. So yeah, it does seem like there is some kind of loss is not the word that I want to use, but maybe that's like in the cards.
Mm-hmm.
Shifts in legacies, shift in foundation as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The fourth house is the end of matters, so
Mm-hmm.
that's also very much a heavy focus.
Also, a lot of spirit here in
Mm,
Sagittarius, which is her seventh house. So something that she is pursuing. So I wonder if she may have like a pivotal role here and like what she's choosing to develop this year in terms of partnership. So obviously she's in a relationship, but I'm talking like professional relationship
yeah,
too. Like it seems to be an important piece of the year.
definitely, definitely. But then let's go back to her monthly return.
Yeah. Okay. So this one, there's some nice looking things in here. There's some nice looking things. This looks very difficult, like having Mars right on the ascendant. But Mars can do some favors too. So yeah, there's definitely some difficulty there with Mars, but Jupiter's there too. So there's some sort of mixed bag in terms of a big push of expression, perhaps, because she's been kind of quieter, but she's been more outspoken about reproductive justice and things like that recently. But
Yeah, again, like given what I said about like the potential for shifts in alliances and allegiances and things like that. I mean, sometimes when you see the ruler of the 10th in the first, it's like authority comes to you, right? I do
mhm,
think that, if the authority comes to her, I do think it will be contested. I do think people will have an issue with that, totally. That's definitely in the cards. I do think that people will be given that choice to mobilize around her or not, or maybe like they may have questions about like how central her role needs to be in like whatever ends up happening. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Look at this sun on the IC. They are definitely going to be pushing her to the front somehow. They are definitely going to be, whether it's as an important VP or whether they do turn around and say, you know what, we're going to endorse Kamala Harris.
I mean, all that
Um,
stuff is on her Mars, and her Mars rules are 11th. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some sort of like push from authority figures and people in proximity to like really have her take more of a leading role in everything.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's Joe's 12th house Pisces moon. It's her 10th house Pisces moon.
Mm,
And she has Jupiter ruling fortune this month. So that's something. And Jupiter's in her first house right now by
hmm.
transit. So there's some really nice looking things for Kamala Harris here. I mean, what's the moon going to move into though? The moon, I mean, if I'm being generous, I mean, it's toward the end. It's the 12-degree thing, but
Hmm.
it's going to run into this T square. We've
Yeah.
got Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus. It's all very bittersweet, right?
Hmm.
Um, there's going to be, if Biden does end up endorsing her, yes, like you said, she's going to face some backlash. She's going to face some criticism, but this is also a huge moment for her in her career, and a strange one too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the month is very corrupt, like, but she's empowered, but in a way that like gives like more elevation, I think, just because the moon and Jupiter are both answering to the same planet. So,
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
okay,
So
let's talk about Trump
let's do
because
it.
there's so much going on there. Like, I don't know where to start.
Oh my God. Okay. So he just had a birthday. So Trump just had a birthday.
Hmm.
Um, okay. And are you doing good mode? Do you need to take a break or anything?
No, I'm great.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Okay. So Trump is in his seventh house year. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Let me pull up my Trump notes. So Trump is in his seventh house year, ruled by Saturn. And he too has a ruler of the year in the 12th house. Yes.
Yeah.
This one is in detriment in the sign of Cancer, but it is also bona fide by Venus. So when we're talking about seventh house, themes of partnership, allies, opponents, these themes are definitely huge. A lot of people are wondering, where in the heck is Melania Trump? I would say based on this alone, it looks like they are having marriage difficulties for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if he doesn't win, if there's going to be a divorce.
Probably. I mean, they also probably have some arrangement where they spend lots of time apart.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, for sure. I mean, that you could say that too, just by like the ruler being in the 12th.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? So like I would say that like some people are like, oh, is the sixth house enemies? Is the seventh house enemies? It's like, yeah, they can both be enemies. I think the seventh house is more of like a rival who's on equal footing because, with the opposition aspect, it's the only aspect where people are looking at you on roughly the same level. With the other aspects, someone's either like got the advantage or someone has got the disadvantage, right?
Mhm.
The sixth house is a different type of inimical relationship. I think it's just more of I think a lot of the acute nature of Mars, just because it's the house where Mars has its joy, right? I think of those little inconveniences, acts of insubordination, things like that, as opposed to like being challenged by someone who could be considered your equal in some
Mhm.
respect.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And wait, are you talking about Saturn being six signs?
I'm talking about Saturn ruling both the seventh and the
Oh,
sixth. So,
nice, nice, nice. Yeah. So bringing in the sixth house themes, got it. Because
hmm
I'm seeing another sixth house connection here
yes.
when you count how many signs away is Saturn from the sign of the year. We're also getting a sixth house theme here too.
hmm
So yeah, I definitely think that health matters could be an issue for Trump too in this year.
Yeah, no, that definitely on the table for him. Like it's funny because I think it was it 2020 maybe, but like I think it was whenever his last Venus perfection was. Yes, it was the Libra perfection. If you did some of the timing, because I remember there was that pileup at the end of Capricorn, it was opposing that Venus Saturn conjunction, and I think he got COVID or something. So like yeah, I think there's some health stuff that's implied, but like last time that Saturn Venus conjunction was activated by perfection, whether it was Saturn or Venus or whatever, I was like, I saw that and I was like, that does not look like someone who's going to like seize office again. That does not look like that. It looks like something else entirely. It looks
Mhm.
like someone being some kind of blockage or hindrance to achieving that station, which is implied by Venus.
Mm, okay. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there with his what's going to happen because that Mars retrograde that is a huge part of our election forecast terrain is going to retrograde right on over. Well, first of all, it's going to begin in his first house,
hmm
and then it's going to retrograde over Venus, but also
Saturn.
his time lord. And Mars retrogrades are periods where it's a little unpredictable because sometimes there's a lot of heat, there's a lot of wrath and outrage and uprising energy with Mars retrogrades, but there's also exhaustion and depletion and feeling confused about what to do next. Like I keep telling people that Mars retrogrades, they kind of bring your passion and your desires into question. And so right now he has his mind set on a goal. And when that Mars retrograde comes on over, he's going to have to rethink what his plan is. He's going to have to make a different plan. And just for clarification for folks, the Mars retrograde is going to begin in early December. So December 6th, it begins at, what is it, 7 degrees, Leo?
Like 6 or
degrees?
7 degrees.
Okay. And then it's going to retrograde back to 17 degrees Cancer. So this is going to be an ongoing story. It's going to station direct at the end of February, but Mars is spending 7 months in each sign. So this is a long, long story that brings us into the spring of next year.
You know what's interesting?
Yeah.
This is like the foil of the Mars retrograde in Aries, which was, we had that election during
2020, yeah.
and that was, it's stationed at the end of Aries, which would have been square his Venus,
This is ninth house. Oh my God.
Saturn, and that whole period was him contesting the election results. And, you know, the ninth house, I would say the seventh and the ninth house do both say things about legality. You know, seventh house is more the litigation, whereas the ninth house is the law itself, right?
Yes.
And I wouldn't be surprised if this Mars retrograde period is another one of those contesting the results of a contest, right?
I
Because maybe
completely
it didn't
agree.
go in your direction or something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like that. And it's interesting how around the end of the post retrograde shadow for the Aries retrograde, that was when January 6th happened, right?
Mhm.
And all of that would have been square his Venus Saturn conjunction. So you do the math.
Yeah, Saturn rules opponents. Venus rules your public office. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I saw your thread on X, aka Twitter, and I think we were messaging about it. And yeah, like you said, second insurrection type event. And I was like, yes, Mo is so right about that. I am reading it the same way. And furthermore, thinking about what the sign of Leo represents on a world stage, it can represent like ornate regal buildings, or let's say like a palace, or let's say a Capitol building, let's say the Supreme Court building. Mars can bring discomfort, confrontation. Hey, let's reassess how much power this person has, this entity has. And yeah, bringing what was coming to me is like desecration of such buildings. So we may see it, or even just Mars challenging leadership in Leo. So that is not just limited to the United States, by the way. We may see those themes elsewhere in the world too.
Yeah, no, especially because that first decan of Leo, there's like that performative, competitive quality. It's like I am vying for this station, and Mars stationing retrograde there, being like, okay, you didn't get it, so like now what? And then it goes backward into Cancer, where Mars has a major loss of dignity. Yes, Mars is triplicity, but I think it's more so whenever I see fallen planets that have triplicity, it's like I find that they represent a core facet of the human experience that people are sympathetic to, even if it's problematic, right?
Mm.
Naturally, you get upset when you didn't win your contest, right? Or you feel deprived of some kind of need, right? Or you feel like, I would say, like the difference between experiencing Mars in Cancer versus the moon in Scorpio. The moon in Scorpio is coming from this insatiable hunger coming from a place of lack, whereas Mars in Cancer is the fear that someone is going to take everything that you love and are familiar with from you, and you're obsessed with keeping it in a way that's pathological. So
Whoa.
I, yeah, I could see how someone feels like they're taking some sort of entitled privilege or comfort, right? And they feel like that's being taken away, and you have to go crazy to defend it. Like I could see that being in the realm of possibility.
I loved your delineation right there, Mo. And I just want to bring in Dr. Olomi talked about how Mars and Cancer in the collective can represent like a caged animal with nothing left to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so just trying to envision what that would mean collectively a month after we have an election and before an inauguration. I'm like, that looks like a sore loser signature to me. A sore loser signature. And exactly what you described, like someone who is just like, I have nothing left to lose. They're taking everything from me. So we've already seen behavior like this from certain groups,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems to describe it again. Yeah. And it's happening in a very important spot in Trump's chart, his first house and his time lord. All right, let's look at his solar return. And this is convenient for us because he just got a brand new one. So we don't have to look at two.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've got two charts. Okay, so we're looking at Saturn. We want to look at Saturn. We've got Saturn, which is his time lord, moving out of detriment in Cancer, moving into Pisces, where it has reception with Jupiter. Jupiter's aspecting it, and so it's getting some support from Jupiter there.
Mm-hmm.
And Saturn does hold triplicity in Gemini, so there is a little bit of mutual reception, easing some of the harshness of the square. Saturn moves to the 9th house, where topics of courts and legal disputes are going to continue to be important themes for him in this year ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly his own personal suits that he's moving through, but potentially even with what we were just talking about with the Mars retrograde, some challenges, some contested results.
Yeah, I mean, that reception between Saturn and Jupiter looks very interesting because that is a very corrupted Jupiter. Jupiter's corrupt, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not honoring its typical role, which is, operating for the highest good of everyone. It's, what if we just sort of, I don't know, rewrote the law because we felt like it type energy.
Just
And
like what's happening now at the Supreme Court.
yeah, it's just very fascinating as well, just because Jupiter unfortunately is in its own decan. It's got triplicity. It's empowered to, kind of play with different permutations of the law and just to increase the amount of subjective interpretation that can happen as a result. And so it's ironic because while that should help Trump, and it kind of does, when a planet is answering to a ruler that is not doing well, that also can backfire.
Totally. Yeah.
So that's very, very interesting to see as a dynamic when it comes to his Time Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about the proximity with Saturn to the midheaven too?
Um, so I know sometimes like when malefics are close to the midheaven, whether it's by transit or like within like an important chart, usually Mars indicates like a separation. Saturn indicates a blockage, right?
Mm, mm,
And so yes, while on some level the manifestation of that Saturn showing up is having the courts or legal bodies run interference and, rewrite the law in his favor, to some extent, I could see some of those like attempts backfiring because of the Pandora's box that has now been opened,
mhm.
right? I could see like a blockage or obstacle to getting towards some kind of station.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy, right? Um, okay, yeah, love that. His his perfected sign jumps to the 8th house. So the importance of donors, the importance of people who support him financially, also some of his own financial challenges. We saw this as a big theme in his solar return last year. So to see 8th house and 9th house themes persist, I know that he's hurting in terms of finances with hiring lawyers and being able to stay on top of that. Luckily, his donors are lucky for him, his donors are being generous with him. So yeah, that shows the importance of the eighth house and the connection with the seventh house. That was another thing that made me think like shared assets, seventh house. Like if I saw that in a person's chart, I might think about what's happening in their marriage, right? So that is interesting to show up there too.
Yeah, I mean, it also looks like more lawsuits because you owe people money. Like, I mean, sometimes, especially because the 12th part of that midheaven, which falls in his natal eighth, is
Mm.
in Aquarius in the seventh. So it just does feel like, again, more litigation, more lawsuits, more debt, owing more people. Like, yes, equally maybe signing contracts to get more, donor funds. It's very much in the realm of possibility, but just because it's Saturn, it makes me think of like making a very binding pact where you have to pay a lot of money over a lot of time, right?
Mm-hmm. Like some of his
Um,
friends right now.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking at the ascendant and how his ascendant moves to the second house. So what he's focused on this year is finances. What he is focused on is earning money, um, and raising money. What ends up being a major focus of the year is 12th house topics. So behind the scenes topics, also enemies, um, any kind of like private battle. And yeah, as I said at the start, half joking, is also, whether or not he would have to serve any sort of time. Now, he does have Regulus rising, and that keeps getting him, like we used to joke that that degree is like a get out of jail free card, but literally it seems to keep coming in handy for him. But regardless, what ends up being something that he's very focused on this year is matters of the 12th house.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I think Joe had something similar, but in one of the monthly charts where it's like, oh, the ascendant like is in the 12th, but then like the 12th part is activating his natal fifth, right? And so maybe something coming up around his children, maybe something coming up around people who act on his behalf. And
Stormy Daniels, maybe.
yeah, I
Fifth
mean,
house.
exactly. I think that something about like the sexual misconduct that happens behind closed doors, I think that's not going away.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes more apparent. I think it's interesting that the ascendant, even though it's like in between Saturn and Mercury, like I don't know, it just makes me think about his Mercury placement as well, and like who's close to him, right? And like how those people may also, I mean, we just saw like one of his buddies is serving like a 4 month
4 months, yeah.
prison sentence, like just things like that coming
Mm-hmm.
up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. And then also I want to look at the lot of fortune. So the lot of fortune is in Libra. It's right on his Neptune. So this is going to describe things that happen. To me, this really spoke to his following, his very devoted following. And so he may not even need to say the word when we're talking about what would happen if he contested and let's say it didn't go in the way that he wanted, or they're pushing for um like like contesting the results, for example. There's something very significant about his following this year. There's
Mm,
some very significant development with his following and the lengths that they're willing to go for him and how they continue to donate and support him. That's his
mhm.
Neptune. So yeah, this is showing up there. And also, yeah, it's the third house too. So maybe third house developments end up becoming really important in this year as well.
Yeah,
Things that happen to him.
it'd be interesting to see what happens with like social media because something like I've been tracking Trump's continuous monthly transfers, and it seems like more of the constructive things that happen to him center around his role as a media personality. And I'm
Mm,
wondering if that maps onto that as well.
Yeah, like maybe he gets kind of like a deal or something like that to be like a speaker, like a Joel Osteen, basically.
Yeah, because if you remember, so before he switched out of the Capricorn profection, when he had his month of destiny back in March, April, Truth Social like went public on the stock market and they got that
Oh.
crazy valuation or something. And I was like, oh, that makes sense for your month of destiny. So interesting. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of months of destiny, that month that we suspect that something may develop with Kamala, that's a month of destiny for Biden. I meant to mention that. But
Yeah.
anyway, here his a lot of spirit is in Aries. So this is something he pursues in this year ahead, something related to the ninth house. So I was thinking countersuits, um, developments with judges, developments with um, some of his legal, like I think he's going to be countersuing and looking for to get some of his convictions overturned. So he's going to appeal.
Hmm.
But yeah, maybe when we're talking about election results, could there be something important with the ninth house? Would he see it as strategic to pump up the 25th Amendment for some reason for Biden? Like, I don't know. So, yeah, but that's something he
Yeah.
pursues this year.
The last thing I want to point out is the repetition of both Mercury and Venus in the 12th.
Mm,
Um, Again, that does not feel good for above board communications about anything. It feels very good for deception. I love how, I mean, Venus returning on behalf of the sun is literal because Libra and Taurus are third and 10th respectively. So it's, oh, he's running for contests to be in charge of things. He's vying for votes. Makes sense. But then Mercury returning on behalf of the sun is interesting because it makes me feel that the intention around running for president is less about holding the office and more about the financials of it, especially because that sits in the 12th of the return. And I think a lot about foreignness as a 12th house concept,
mhm.
wanting that access to foreign entities, be they governments, whatever. So makes a lot of sense to me.
Totally. Yeah, I was kind of getting the same vibe too, that while he may desire to obviously be president again and all the perks that come with that, that the big focus for him is his finances this year. Let's take a look at the moon and then we'll look at the monthlies. This this moon is making it's got a lot going on. But the thing that stands out the most to me is the aspect that it's going to make first, which is the opposition to Saturn. It's headed right into an opposition with Saturn. So that is some bad news, some difficulty, not getting the results that we want. And then it goes on to make some aspects with Mercury over here. So we get some Mercury, like public speaking, social media platforms, etc. Then we get like this sun moment with some sort of leadership thing. There's something with leadership presence with the sun. And then we get Venus. So if I were talking to a client, I would say the year starts out really challenging for you. Like there's going to be some more challenging things earlier in the year, but then the year ends a lot better for you. So I would say the same thing to Trump. It looks like there's some difficulty, maybe a few months in, but then things definitely get better at the end.
Yeah, it's looking like a really negative decision or outcome in the first half, just because the moon connects with Saturn in 5 units, and then right after that, there's a square to Mercury, which feels like some kind of negotiation or bartering. The sun, maybe some authority makes some decision on your behalf. Venus, not that you get away with things per se, but like you get a more optimal outcome than if you were to have just connected with Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I do just need to bring something in here before we get into his monthly charts. But if you're doing, and I don't know if you can see this.
I can see it, yeah.
Oh, you can? The thing I just pulled up? Okay. So it's Donald Trump's Zodiacal releasing. And if you're doing it where you don't flip the lots, then Donald Trump goes into a peak period on level 1 in April. And this brings us to his Leo house, which does contain his malefic contrary to sect. So this would be a very, very, very important period, perhaps career-defining moment in Trump's legacy, but it's also one of difficulties and disruptions and controversies. So take that for what you will. I know that different astrologers, some astrologers who I really respect, love you, Patrick, likes to flip the lots. But if you don't flip the lots, I think that this is really interesting to consider. So this, for me, seeing what happens will kind of confirm for me whether or not I want to flip them. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about that, like with that sun, with the aspect of the sun, that immediately makes me think about, because if he does rise in some way in April, like there's a lot of scenarios to consider here. Like if Democrats were to want to put in someone else in the running with that delay in election, that might change my forecast a little bit. But seeing Trump rise to some sort of prominence, career-defining prominence in April, that the current timeline is after the election, which makes me support the theory that he loses, he contests, but then something else comes out of it.
That's what I'm also leaning towards because what's interesting when I looked at the monthly transfers for both Trump and Biden, because they have overlapping months of destiny. It's actually kind of crazy.
Oh, wow.
I
Wow.
think it's February next year. They both have a month of destiny. And so I don't know what that's about, to be honest. I thought it was a little eerie that they had that overlap. And
Yeah.
the one thing I will point out is that yes, peak periods are busy and there can be an elevation, but a lot of times if you have the malefic out of sect in that sign, it is very, very, very difficult. And sometimes you can't like, well, with Saturn, it's a lot more obvious because Saturn by nature is like blocking, but like Mars is like more of a severing action, right? So it's a more active element. So I'm wondering like what that would indicate because to me it would be more compelling if, oh yeah, there's like this peak that's overlapping with the election and this, that, and the third. Like, I mean, when you looked at Trump's dashas, right? He had this crazy activation of like the planet that says things about career for him as like a special indicator. And then I think on the lower level, because it's like you've got the Mahadasha, which is like sort of you and your overall themes. The second level below, which is the Antardasha, which says things about like the topic or the nature of the topic. And then the third, which is the Pratyantardasha, which is like the people who help facilitate that or like the functions or roles. And it was like Jupiter, Jupiter, Sun. And like all of those things are friendly with his Leo ascendant. So it's like, oh, literally being elevated to like king ruler status. I mean, it was literal. Doesn't quite happen again this year. I mean, he's still running an important dasha that's relevant for career, but I think he's on the tail end of that. I think that does
Okay.
shift in like 2025 or 6 or something.
Interesting.
So it's just interesting to think about. I'm like, maybe he could be doing things that are not the presidency, but maybe they're very bad things. Like, who knows?
Yeah, totally. Well, I would agree that like he's not going anywhere
No.
regardless.
Mm-mm.
Regardless. Um, okay. So let's take a look at his monthlies. So again, just like with Biden, we're going to look at him for the next few months. Now, just to recap, because he did just get a ruling in his favor today. The Supreme Court appears to be in a position to give him not just leniency, but immunity.
Immunity, yeah.
So
literal when you look at the chart. I mean,
yeah. So just to share with our audience, this is his very first monthly return, which is also his sole return. So Abu Mashar instructs us to be very cautious when forecasting for the month, when using a chart that forecasts for the full year. So in this case, I might look at what the moon is doing. And because the moon is not in an immediate opposition to Saturn, I don't know if I'm going to count that in terms of what the month tells. How would you go about this, Mo?
so I mean, I would still class this as a corruption of the month just because the moon is angular from a malefic. Would I like necessarily be very, I don't know, would I stress it hard? No, just because to your point, this is the chart for the whole year. I think looking at the moon's actual next aspects makes a lot of sense because if you think about where we are in relation to the month, I think we're halfway through this month. And so I don't know if we're treating like
True.
the moon's degrees as I don't know how we would like make the movement of the moon proportional to like the actual month itself, but I would say the experience that we're having is somewhere in that Mercury square sun square thing going on that
Yeah.
the moon has, like, because it feels like there's like a renegotiation or reinterpretation of something
Yeah, no, I see what
that
you're doing
favors
here.
him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And the quality of the month, like the feel of the month is going to be given by the sign of Cancer. And so he does technically have a gag order right now. He is trying to tone it down. So that is Cancer energy, like being a little bit more protective, being a little bit more careful, maybe trying to protect his energy a little bit since he did just sit in a New York City courtroom for like a month straight.
Yeah.
So maybe he's trying to just like keep his energy for the campaign trail, unlike what Biden did last week. I would also say that, yeah, the 12th part of the ascendant is again going to go to his natal fifth house. The ruler of fortune is going to be Venus. So that tends to be favorable outcomes for the month. We're also seeing, let's see, what's going on with his sign of the year. His sign of the year, he's going to have Pluto in his sign of the year much of the year. Maybe medieval astrologers didn't look at that, but I am going to look at that. That's ongoing. What's going on with his natal
Oh,
Saturn this month?
Saturn just stationed retrograde actually, like in the middle of what would be this month. So,
Oh yeah, so that's important since Saturn is his time lord. Yeah, Saturn station retrograde in his eighth house. He had a bunch of donors come through for him in this month because this was after his conviction, wasn't
it
it?
was, yeah.
Yeah. So he had like a ton of donors come through for him during this month. So yeah, I think maybe you're right then. This opposition to Saturn may represent the conviction, and then the square over here may represent the debate going in his favor, the courts ruling in his favor. Yeah. And this
I could see
Mercury would
that.
then be the speech. Yeah. And
Yeah.
him looking better with the sun.
Yeah, I think that's where we kind of are in that like whole sequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was definitely looking at the moon ending on Venus, and I was forecasting leniency with the sentencing because that's going to be the last thing that happens at the end of this month. And his next month looks like he's celebrating something. Was there anything else you wanted to point out about this chart?
Nothing, because again, like, I don't want to overinterpret the year chart. So, like, I think looking at next month, the next 2 months are really interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. All right. So here's his July month. This is going to take him up to August 15th. So why don't I just might as well pull that one up and have it ready to go. All right. So let's take a whirl with this July one. So the July one begins with a very celebratory energy of Sagittarius on the ascendant. It's going to be associated with the 12th part of Gemini, which happens to be his 11th house of supporters and people in his political party. Jupiter is angular here. So there's some good news, something to be celebrated here. Maybe he's picking a running mate. People are really excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the day that the RNC begins, by the way. So this month is covering the RNC.
Mm-hmm.
We have Fortune in Jupiter's sign. I think it's far enough away from Saturn, even though it is present with Saturn. So there's still some background of hardships going on, but he's not feeling it quite as hard right now. Right now, it's Neptune. He's on a high. I think he is on a high this month. This places him in his 8th house month. So the the donors, everything is pouring in right now. So this is a month ruled by Jupiter. That's again a blessing. Jupiter is in Gemini, which is returning to the sign of his sun. So that planet, that transit is really emphasized this month. Another really big thing that's happening this month is the Mars-Uranus conjunction on his midheaven. And his gag order is lifted. And this is the day after his sentencing. And I don't know. I mean, that moon is telling us another thing, but everything I've said so far seems like he's celebrating something.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I do find it fascinating that the ascendant is in the return sixth. I'm wondering if that's just something about like taking on like another project and feeling like motivated to like push in a particular direction. I agree with like what you're saying about the donors really coming through, especially with the Jupiter emphasis. What are his monthly? Yeah, no, he's like very much in a people give me money month, if you will. And I think maybe the inflammatory incision, because this also does feel like a month of him being inflammatory, just given what
Yeah.
the Mars Uranus is doing to his midheaven.
Yeah.
And that being sort of the thing that motivates people to support him for sure. The moon's next aspect is to Venus, like, so that again seems to emphasize to me that yeah, like this is a month where people are feeling like he won the lottery just because, the court basically ruled in his favor, right?
Yeah.
However, it is fascinating that simultaneously the moon is in the 12th. It's coming off of maximum fall.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. And it's coming out of a square from Pluto, too.
yeah, and the month is still corrupt because the moon's last aspect will be that opposition to Mars. So
Yeah.
the month starts on a high, and then I do think it gets progressively worse. So, um,
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah. And I think you mentioned his monthly transfer is to the 8th too. So there's
yeah, it's
double 8th house emphasis.
double eighth house. Like it's just really giving that. Now, as for this chart, like I think for the fact that the moon is applying to Venus as its next aspect and seeing what Venus is ruling in the chart, like this definitely does feel like a great month to announce a running mate. I'm wondering if like people have mixed feelings about the running mate though, just
Ooh,
because
go
of the
on.
condition of the moon and Jupiter.
Oh,
where it's like, okay, yeah,
true.
he's got this, he's got that, he's choosing his running mate, but the condition of Jupiter just does not make me think, oh, this is a great running mate choice, you
Yeah,
know?
it may be someone a little unexpected, maybe, being that it's in detriment.
Yeah,
Because I think everyone thinks he's going to pick JD Vance. Like, that's the expected, I would think. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, who knows?
But oh yeah, and there's a third emphasis here of eighth house too, because Saturn is Time Lord. It's going to be in his
Mm-hmm.
eighth house the
His
majority of
eighth.
this year.
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm like,
And it's nearing into a square with his sun. It doesn't quite get there, but
no.
it's trying.
Yeah,
Okay. So let's move on to
August.
August. All right, so
Mm,
this one gets a little
we're
dicier.
back in
So
the 12th.
mm, we're in a
We're
ninth
back in the
house
12th.
month.
Yeah, and I think again, it's interesting because he's a lot closer to the actual Mars Jupiter conjunction with his uh monthly return. And so again, it's funny because this is also, if you think about the monthly handover from Pisces to Aries, it's like
Yeah,
the month ruled by the benefic of sect to the month ruled by the most challenging planet. It's
the
like a major shift in experience, I would say.
totally. Yeah, the malefic of sect. Yeah, for sure. And we're back with like a protective Cancer rising energy for the month, which is highlighting the sign of Libra, which is the media, his natal third house,
Hmm.
speeches being important, event related developments in the month.
Yeah, you know what else he has going for him in this configuration? He's got the moon has the condition of estrangement. The moon does not see Cancer, right? And what makes it worse
Oh,
is it's ruling the chart.
oh, wow.
And it is just separating from both the square to Saturn and the opposition from Mars, and it's applying to, well, and the Sun, and it's applying to Mercury, which is interesting. So I don't know what happens between now and then, but it does make me think that there is a shift in alliances that's
Yeah.
happening for him.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ninth house stuff going on this month, which is promised in his solar return. And he still has eclipses going on in his ninth house as well. So there's still a lot of developments there. His monthly transfer comes to Aries, which is his ninth house. Again, we're in that ninth house perfection month. It looks difficult. We've got Saturn on the midheaven up here, which is further emphasized by the moon, like you mentioned. I mean, there's some nice things to say here, like similar to what we were saying with Kamala. Her chart, her monthly return looks similar. Um, yeah, I mean, there's maybe some nice things that happen with Jupiter and Venus, but at the end of the day, you have Mars and Saturn later in degree. So it kind of just looks like party's over a little bit to me. Um,
Just because
yeah,
Saturn is in the ninth and it's actually on the midheaven and it's retrograde, I wonder if this is the revisiting of some litigation.
I agree. Yeah, yeah, more lawsuits, and that might be where, because he doesn't like to be embarrassed. And so this might be where some of the embarrassment kind of comes back. Like I saw that July month and I was like, he is on a high, but that bubble bursts and it bursts quickly. And that's happening now. And we have Fortune ruled by Jupiter this month. So there are some favorable things that happen for him this month. But the month being ruled by his out of sect malefic brings definite challenges to the month. So this is a total mixed bag, but I think it's not mild. I think it's big, big ups and downs, I would say.
Yeah, no, I feel like there's a shift in alliance that's heavily, heavily implied, and I think that not saying that's going to derail his campaign necessarily, but it might make things more difficult, just considering that that ascendant is on his natal Mercury in the 12th. Um, and it's interesting because the ascendant is in the 12th part of Libra, which is like again like the third house for him. So I think that there's something about
Just show his chart again. Yeah, absolutely.
loyalties within the party, loyalty to something. Like I do think that this is a period where loyalties will be tested, and it does affect how he moves with his campaign.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That's really highlighting his natal Mercury there. Another thing that I think he's really going to be feeling this month is because Saturn's his time lord, the square to Mars,
Yeah.
which I know we've been throwing around the word halting in the media talking about Biden, but this quite literally is an aspect that can delay, create impatience, create frustration. Like if he has to sit in another trial, let's say, or he's like appealing something, there can be a great deal of frustration there, I would say. And Jupiter can in part magnify that frustration, but Jupiter can also bring some relief to that configuration as well. Like Jupiter is also bonifying his time lord this year
Hmm.
in this month because it's exact. That is like an exact aspect. So yeah, again, like big ups and downs for Trump during this period.
Yeah, no, August feels like a 180. August feels like a
Yeah.
180. Like, oh, things were great. Um, about the donation check, it didn't quite clear. What's going on? Where did the money go? Things like that. Just because Jupiter does say things about, shared resources and whatnot. So, I mean,
Also,
yeah,
could what happens at the DNC impact him?
I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest.
Yeah,
Because then that changes the whole strategy, right? If for some reason, like Joe is not the person you're running against, you have to come up with a whole strategy pretty late into the game. So,
exactly. Yeah, because a lot of people have brought up how Kamala Harris is a former prosecutor and how she would probably destroy him in a debate.
it's funny because I think at the tail end of this month, that would be the debate, the next
Okay, that's
debate,
right.
assuming they both accept the invite, because I think it's supposed to be on September 10th or something. So,
Damn, and that's his natal ascendant, 29
hmm
degrees, right there with his Mars, but it's
hmm
retrograde. So Moon applying by trine to that retrograde Mars, yeah, like he will maybe be out of his comfort zone a little bit, being that it's retrograde. He may not be able to depend on his strategy as normal, but he's still going to bring that Regulus charm, like where he builds like conviction and trust with his audience and his followers. So he definitely will have that going for him, I think. But the retrograde means that he's not always going to be able to depend on that, perhaps, if that's what it's coming to, if someone does replace Biden in that debate. Yeah.
yeah, I like, I still can't figure this month out because I'm like, something is changing, but like, I'm not quite sure what, and it is going to affect like who he's aligning himself with or not. So,
Yeah. Well, I was thinking just one last thing about because the solar return mentioned health. And here we have a sixth house moon, and the moon isn't doing too hot. I mean, it's not doing terrible, but this protective Cancer rising, I feel like he's going to be having to watch his health this month, I think. Because, yeah, he may not look quite as old as Biden, but
he's also old.
he's very old. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Mo, was there anything else you wanted to look at tonight?
No, I kind of want to sit with everything we talked about and just see what happens. Because then I can look at what I have written for everything else. Because I think the juicier things happen like September onward, but like everything's changing all the time. So like,
I know so much can happen here in the next couple of months. We'll be waiting to find out more about what's going on with Biden's health, what's his strategy, who is Trump going to pick as a running mate. So yeah, we will circle back and we will be able to look at these candidates' charts in more detail, maybe talk about some of the things we didn't get to today, even though we ended up covering a lot today. And we'll be able to kind of check in and recap and look at those next few months going forward. So but for those of you who are tuning in with us, Mo, where can people connect with you? And what do you have going on right now?
right now, I'm a little quiet. I will be back with a vengeance, maybe in August, September. So sorry about that. You can find me at Austral Tour on Twitter, Instagram, Substack. Um, yeah, that's where you can find me. Stay tuned because I hope to relaunch the Fixed Astrology podcast later this year, with some exciting projects. So, yeah.
Yay, yay. And I'm Catherine Urban. If you're new, you can find me at Astro Catherine on all platforms. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of nerdy right now. I'm really heavy into obviously like this kind of research, and I'm reading some ancient texts right now, some ancient astrology texts, and I hope to be offering something. I want to do in the coming year is offer like a collective book group. I want to read Abu Mashar together. um yeah, so I want to if anyone is interested to read with me, we're gonna actually be reading the Great Introduction. I was gonna see if I could reach it, but I can't. And we, because that is like such a great introduction to traditional astrology, and it's basically like a whole other introductory course in astrology. So it'll be fun to read that together. So stay tuned with me for more details on that. And other than that, I'm just offering consultations right now. Are your books open, Mo?
My books are open, but like talk to me about dates because it looks like I'm unavailable by design.
Okay.
Yeah,
So DM you is what you're
just
saying.
DM me. Yes.
Cool, cool. Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in with us. You can connect with us on all platforms. You can book readings with us and let us know what you think, but please be kind. Please be civil. This is an astrology discussion. This isn't an opinions forum. This is, two astrologers trying to look at what the charts say. And yeah, thanks for tuning in with us, and we'll see you next time.
See you
Bye.
guys.